Welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk. This is episode 3, and I'm sitting here with Coach Dom, Rob, good friend of mine, who I met working in a previous job. And I'm going to let him take it away from here just to introduce himself. Tell the people who you are, what you do, and what we're going to talk about.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me on, Matt. It's a pleasure. Like I said, we've been good mates for a little while now. My name is Robert. I'm 23 years old. I am a PT and boxing coach. And the main purpose of why we're here today is to talk about therapy and how it benefits young men, as I've worked through it for the last 8 years. And it's been a very useful tool in getting me to where I am today.
Powerful. I want to start our recorded conversation because we had a bit of a chinwag before this, but I want to start it with thanking you for being open. And immediately, as soon as I put it up on Instagram, if anybody wants to do this, Rob jumped straight into it, being like, I want to talk about the benefit of therapy for young men. It's not easy to bring that to the table. It's not easy to open up to whoever's going to hear this and say, I've done this, you should do this. So thank you for bringing that, because one person might happen to see this or hear this and go, oh, it's not weak for me to go and talk about my feelings.
If one person takes that message away from this podcast, then I know me and you are both going to be very happy with the outcome.
Exactly. That's why we do this. That's why I am open about speaking about my own struggles and why I want more people to be open about talking to theirs when they're ready. Because if one person benefits, success.
100%.
But we like to have a little bit of structure to things. So we're going to kind of go through a couple of chapters of your story to get you to pull a little bit out. Parts of this, when people are listening, might get heavy. So warning, difficult conversations may come up, hard conversations, things that might make you feel uncomfortable. If you want to talk about any of this personally, if you're listening to this, reach out to me. I'm also going to put Robert's Instagram into here. So if you want to talk to him about it, reach out. And on the higher level of the whole goal of this conversation, if something really disturbs you or brings something up, go to therapy. That's what it's there for. So the first section is going to be finding out about you, where you came from, and how you end up getting to needing therapy. So what was your environment like as a teenager, the stuff you were surrounded by, without naming anyone?
Yep. So when I was about 13, I moved back to Dublin. I spent a couple of years in Roscommon, in a very small village. Very quiet, very otherworldly than growing up in Finglas, as I did from when I was born till I was about 10.
Those are basically two different planets.
Exactly. It genuinely felt like I was in a different realm or something. Like I didn't know what was going on. It took me a long time to adjust to that. And I've always naturally been more comfortable introverted, but being able to, in certain environments, step outside of who I am and become what I like to call this character. And moving back to Dublin, everything had changed. Obviously, me and my mates went from running around the playgrounds and climbing trees to now we're 13, 14, obviously the youngest in my group, so now they're 15, 16. Alcohol is starting to come into play for them lads. Other sort of not so fun stuff is starting to come into play for those lads as well, that I wasn't 100% comfortable with. But as a young man, or young adolescent, you start to kind of get pulled towards that. Peer pressure is definitely a big thing. Exactly. Peer pressure is definitely a big thing. And it was just the norm growing up in Finglas. You start drinking young, you start experimenting with shit very young. By the way, I'm going to give a disclaimer. Pardon my French here. I have a little bit of a potty mouth. I might drop a few cusses on this one. I apologize in advance.
we're more than okay with that.
But yeah, so
on YouTube, yes.
Coming back up into Dublin was a little bit of a experience, to say the least. My mum was newly married. Me and her partner at the time didn't really see eye to eye. We were completely different people, and it just wasn't good environment to be around him. Nothing abusive or anything like that. More so just verbal disagreements and not exactly the most uplifting of characters. And as a young man, it's a little bit difficult to kind of chop and change with those sort of things, moving around a lot, and then coming back to Dublin, having to navigate what life is like now in comparison to what I knew it as before I moved to Roscommon.
Oh,
That led,
difficult, Jang, because you've
it,
gone from calm, relaxed, quiet Roscommon, where everyone's probably friendly and says hi, to now being depth of Finglas, where some wonderful people there, but we know what it's like. If you're listening to this from Dublin, you know what we're talking about. If you don't, come out and hang out in Finglas for the day. Maybe Rob can tour you around.
I would recommend not doing that. Just watch the RTE special Inside the Cave, and you'll get a good idea of what it's like. But yeah, like if you grew up in a council estate around Dublin, you know what the crack is.
I'm
So
sure
coming
many
back
people
to
would resonate with that.
yeah, I hope so, because it's in those areas especially. It's not easy to say I'm not doing the best, because they're blue collar working environments, and it's you get up and you trot along. But coming up, I ended up dealing with a lot of anxiety. Didn't really know what anxiety was. Um, I've always been emotionally aware, but this was a new one for me. Um, and with that,
Where do you
I,
think the anxiety was coming from? Was it literally the environment of getting through this new place every day? Was it interactions in a new school? What was bringing things up?
it was coming back to an area that I had always considered home, and feeling like I didn't belong anymore. I had I didn't know who I was in this place anymore, because obviously the extra, like I said, that when I become extroverted, when I'm in social uh, aspects, I somewhat play a character, because naturally I'm more introverted, and I think a lot of people do as well. They have a little bit of a different type of personality that comes out when they're around their mates, or when they're out having a drink or something like that. A little bit of a different sort of person comes out than what they might naturally be comfortable with. As I said, I'm naturally an introvert. I enjoy my time. I enjoy my own space, and sometimes I don't mind letting a couple of people into that piece. But for the most part, a different side of me comes out when I'm in social aspects. So trying to navigate who that character was compared to the character I was able to play in Roscommon. Again, it's a lot quieter. It's a lot more calm. People are a lot more laid back. Um, so the
Would it
character I
be,
played down there, very
would
different.
it be fair to say in Roscommon you could kind of take the mask off and not be worried about how you might feel with it versus
Exactly.
things get it back on?
Yeah, to a degree. I changed out the mask in Roscommon, because I had to play it a little bit different. Because in Roscommon, especially that time, there wasn't a lot of people from Dublin. There wasn't a lot of people migrating down to Roscommon. So for some people, it was still kind of like, go back to the city. It was
Right.
that sort of, yeah, there was that
So
sort of
even down there
mentality.
you were getting a little bit of not feeling like you belonged.
Exactly. And then starting secondary school down there, I ended up finding like my little group of Dublin lads, and we just stuck to each other like super glue for that year. But then, as soon as I finally felt settled in Roscommon, and I felt like, oh yeah, I could see myself being here the next 10 years. I was back in Dublin. I was back in Dublin the summer before I started secondary school. So then I'm like, oh shit, I'm seeing all these faces. I know these people by name. We've went to school together. We've played together. I've been to your 8th birthday party, and now
You
I
feel
don't
like
know.
sure.
Yeah, now it's like we're sitting in the same classroom. We're like, oh my god, you're back, and it's like, yeah, I'm back. And that's about as far as the conversation is going, because we haven't seen each other in 3 years, and everything's changed, especially in that age frame. A couple of months makes a big difference.
They're drinking. You're down in Roscommon, probably not doing any of that.
Uh, Roscommon wasn't. Again, I was the youngest in my friend group, and we got up to
Some messing.
some things. In in the context of having an honest conversation, I started smoking and I started drinking when I lived in Roscommon, because I was 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, and my friends were 16, 17.
Okay. So
I
it's a
lived in a
natural
village. Yeah.
evolution.
I lived in a village that was a quarter mile long, 11 kilometers in either direction to the nearest town. Not even city, the nearest town was 11 kilometers either side of my little village. And all the teenagers in the village kind of like, we hung out together, and I was the youngest there, and it was just a natural thing of like, oh, he's just part of the gang kind of thing. And we started smoking and drinking, and I kind of just got sucked into that because I wanted to stay around what I would have considered my peers then, but it was only because I wasn't around lads my own age. Then coming back to Dublin, I'm like, okay, cool. I've been doing this, but I thought coming back to Dublin, I wouldn't have to do this because I'm with people my own age. And it's like, oh no, that's starting here now as well. And then that led to the anxiety of like, oh, if I don't do this, then the peer
You're
pressure
not
comes
right.
in. I'm not part of the gang. Oh, why aren't you doing this? Oh, don't be dry. All these conversations start happening. And I was already having those conversations at home with my stepdad. Like he did a good job of putting a young man down. Um, Now as a grown man now, having done a lot of work, I just know that that's residual trauma that he never worked through. He never went and got help for what he dealt with, and instead he just decided to project that onto what he could see was a very emotionally aware, strong young man. Because I didn't give a shit about stigmatization or anything like that. I didn't give a shit about what was cool. I started boxing the same time as I started musical theatre.
Interesting combination.
Exactly. I was 12 years old in Roscommon. Or sorry, 11 years old in Roscommon. I found a local boxing club 2 minutes away from me. And one of my mates from school, who was a little bit of considered a weirdo in school, he was doing acting and musical theatre in one of the small towns not too far from us. And my mom didn't drive. So it's just me, my mom, and my little brother. My mom didn't drive. So I was like, oh, I can't go. And then my mom chatted to his mom, and then next thing I knew, I was in the car with him, singing show tunes on the way to theatre. Now, anybody who knows me knows I can't hold a tune to save my life. So
We can talk over that one.
yeah,
I
we
think it's very
can push past that one. I just love the idea of again being on stage, going outside my comfort zone. And boxing did the same thing. Boxing gave me a physical confidence, um, that I knew who I was physically, and theater gave me the freedom to express a different side of me, a freedom to gain confidence where it goes deeper than physicality.
Yeah,
So
showing skill, it's showing you being comfortable being in front of people, you being vulnerable.
exactly, and I think that played a huge role in me being able to understand what I was feeling at a young age as well, because you have to. Right. So,
So,
yeah,
small recording error on my side, so we're editing this. If it comes up, it comes up. But we're
yeah,
talking about how confident and comfortable being on stage made Robert feel.
Yeah, so it brought out I was able to embody different characters and try understand them and what they'd be feeling in certain scenes, and that allowed me to go a little bit deeper into why I was feeling the way I was feeling. Um, which then leads me back to moving back to Dublin and dealing with anxiety and it being a new emotion, but me understanding that something wasn't necessarily right. And it did come from expectations at home to do well in school by like my mom and my grandmother, and then being put down and told I'll never be anything. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. All this shit by my stepdad. And then going into school and trying to play that character, trying to be a part of the crowd and trying to find who I was now that I'm back in Dublin, where I'm supposed to be comfortable, but I don't know. I get like everything looks familiar, but it's different now. And then expectations of your friend group oh, you're back in Dublin now. I went from seeing these lads once every couple of months to, okay, cool, I'm seeing you every day. But now
You have to be there. You have to be part of the group. You have to do the things they're doing. You're losing a sense of freedom, even though in theory you're like, great, I'm back to my mates. But you're like, wait, I'm back to my mates.
Exactly. That was the conversation going on in my head. And then that just spiraled down then. It just spiraled
Well,
down. Anxiety led to depression.
the
Depression led
next
to...
question that I have for you,
Yeah,
a lot of what you're saying there might already be answering this, but it might allow us to go a layer deeper.
beautiful.
Was going to be, because in before this podcast, Rob kind of gave me a little bit of a background on a few things. So one of the things that stepped out to me was you said when you were a teenager, you were an angry teenager that was lashing out. What did that actually look like day to day? Because it sounds like a lot of that is what's causing that.
Yeah, so the anger definitely, it was a result of not being able to understand why I was feeling so anxious, or even understanding that it was anxiety that I was feeling at that stage. And depression was starting to creep its way in as well. So I've been diagnosed with anxiety and depression since I was 16. Um, but that anger, it showed in different ways. It showed in lashing out verbally at home, um, cutting my friends off, um, isolating myself, uh, physically. I know every young man listening to this has probably sparked the wall at some stage.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I've got several scars
yeah,
on my nose from that.
yeah. All my scars are covered by tattoos now. But yeah, I lashed out a couple of times with just being so overwhelmed by anger and not knowing how to channel it correctly. And then maybe I didn't have the MMA gym that night, or maybe I didn't have the boxing club that night, and everything was just getting to me, and I didn't know how to let it out. So, that wall will do. And it was only later on down the year, I think I was about 19 or 20 before I touched on it to a point where I had a breakthrough in therapy. And that was realizing that that wasn't actually me lashing out. That was a form of self-harm.
Yeah, 100%. When you bury a
Because
wall, it's not like doing
exactly,
something out of your body. It's
yeah,
literally, I'm going to hurt myself and then I won't have to feel what I need to feel.
exactly. That's exactly what it was. And I didn't understand that at that age. It became I don't want to feel what I'm feeling now. So I need to feel something else. And
And
pain became that sort of receptor in those moments for a young man.
can you pull back to any specific moment where you're like, something's after happening? I feel upset. I feel anxious. I feel angry. And I don't want to feel this. So I'm just going to bury the wall.
Yeah. So one of the first times I did it, and I actually did some serious damage to my hand, was there was, when we talked a little bit about this before the podcast, growing up with Finglas, anybody again who's grown up in a council estate knows that drugs and crime and violence are quite prevalent around all sort of corners of it, and it's just become normalized. But I was exposed to certain aspects of that world, and I didn't know how to process it. And there were certain people around me, I'm not going to name names or titles or anything like that, but there were certain people around me that were involved in it to a degree that I didn't realize until that time. And I was just so pissed off, for want of a better word. I was so angry. And I didn't want to feel that way anymore. And I just lashed out. And the closest thing to me was my bedroom wall. And I was like, it was a way I could do it that nobody else would see, or so I thought, until my hand swelled up the size of a balloon.
You'll
It's like,
do
that's
that.
a bit of a tell. That becomes a bit of a tell, especially when you're trying to go to MMA training the next night, and your coach is like, what the fuck did you do? And you're trying to explain to him without explaining to him.
You're
So
like, I was sparring at home against the wall. I was practicing. You're not
yeah,
like,
I
oh,
was shadow boxing. I couldn't manage range too well, and the wall kind of just, it was there. Yeah, my coach didn't take that one too lightly. But yeah, that probably would have been one of the first times that I used that as a method of channeling that anger.
And was that then something you default to? You're like, oh, remember that worked because this was the pain. This wasn't the pain.
Exactly.
Where
And
every
then,
time it happened, you're like, let's do it again.
yeah, then it did become sort of a habit. And that's what, after a couple of times of having me take it to the doctor to be like, okay, what do I do here, kind of thing. Um, they were kind of like, okay, what's causing you to do this? Why are you doing this? Why do you feel the need to hurt yourself like this? And then therapy was brought up.
Okay. This pops us into the next part
Yeah,
of.
probably segues nicely into the next question.
I was kind of going to finish this chapter of where you came from with, was there a moment where you realized this is not just a phase, I need help? And then the follow up is, how did a 16-year-old end up in therapy? So if you want to take it from there.
Yeah. So the pivotal moment was I found my mom passed something on to me, and it was journaling. My mom kept a diary, and I've kept a journal since I was about 16. But I found my mom's diary sitting on the table one of the mornings before I was going to school. I say going to school, I ditched quite a lot. But I was
Before you
having,
left the house to pretend you were going to school.
exactly. I found my mom's diary. It was open from where she'd been writing the night before, and she was writing about me and not knowing how to help me or anything like that. And me and my mom didn't have the best relationship at this stage in my life. But there was one thing that stuck with me, and it was my mom referenced me as Jekyll and Hyde.
Okay.
It was like living with two different people. And at this stage, like I said, me and my mom didn't have the best relationship. Now, clarification, me and my mom have a great relationship now. We've mended that fence tenfold. But at this stage, as a young man, we didn't have the best. She didn't realize that I was Dr. Jekyll when my stepdad wasn't in the house. And it was only when he came home that other side of me started to come out, and I started, my guard went straight up. I was like half lowering my guard when he wasn't around, and then when he was around, it became a lot higher. And it was reading that I was just like, oh shit, okay, maybe I'm not doing as well to hide how I'm feeling as I thought I was. I thought as a 16-year-old, I thought I was doing a pretty good job at masking that. Evidently not, because
Mothers always know.
exactly.
Can't hide anything from them.
Yeah. And then it actually turned out that it was my nan's idea to get me into therapy and get me talking to someone. My grandmother, who has been my rock since I was a newborn baby, she's the reason I have my name as well.
Really?
Yeah, my grandmother was the one who named me. I was named after her twin brother. But yeah, so like my nan has always been my rock. My grandmother's has always been my safe haven. Even at this stage of my life, whenever I felt overwhelmed, when I was ditching school, I'd go up to hers at 1 p.m. I'd be like, oh, I'm on lunch. And then I just wouldn't go back to school. But I'd get there and she'd have me 2 ham and cheese toasties and a cup of tea ready to go. Every day like clockwork. Because she knew 7 minutes past 1, Robert be in the door. My food would be on the table. And I'd be what I consider, and still consider to this day, I'd be home. But she was the one who said it to my mom, maybe he needs to talk to someone, maybe he needs to get some help because he's not doing well. And I really wasn't at this stage. Get brought to my GP, and they're like, okay, we have this person that we usually send adolescent boys to. How about we give that a shot? And that's how a 16-year-old who realized, I'm not going to see my 18th birthday if I keep going the way I am. If I keep feeling the way I am.
Heavy realization.
It was. And that's when I was just like, okay, cool. I need to throw myself into this.
And what was your frame of reference for therapy before going in? Did you have like a picture in your head of, I think it's going to be like this, or complete blind? No idea.
The only sort of thing I had was Goodwill Hunting.
So a little heavy.
Yeah, good old Robin Williams and Matt Damon. That was about the only reference I had to what therapy was supposed to be like, because anybody in my
You're ready
family
to lie down on the couch and go, very interesting, and all of that.
exactly. I was getting ready to pick apart the picture he had in his office. But no, like my nana's tried therapy, my mom's been in therapy, my granddad's been in therapy. There's been a good few people in my family who've tried therapy and just not really found a way to stick with it, which I think is heavily part of the stigma around therapy of like, I often say this when I'm talking about therapy, I'm the exception, not the rule. I found my therapist first time.
So the person you met at 16, you're still with now.
I said nearly 8 years down the line, and I've seen him. I make the joke to him. He's my most stable relationship I've ever had. Because it was like about 8 years of nearly every week.
Yeah,
Nearly
'cause
every
something you
week.
mentioned in the pre-pod doc is that
Yeah.
you see him every 2 weeks, pretty much without fail, and that
Yep.
you give it an hour before and an hour after to protect your space.
Yes, that is
Maybe
my hard line. That is my boundary with whether I'm in a romantic relationship, a platonic relationship, or a familial relationship. They all know I'm open with them. Like, look, I have therapy at this time on this day. The hour before, the hour after, they know not to contact me unless it's an emergency. So I know if I'm getting a text or I'm getting a phone call off someone, and in that time frame, I need to answer because something's not right. But other than that, the hour before and the hour after, it's a hard line because it allows me to prepare myself mentally to the analogy me and my therapist use is open those doors into my mind and into how I'm feeling. I open doors and then I need that hour afterwards to close those doors. So everything that we've touched on doesn't spill into the next person I see.
yeah, so you're not continuing to maybe trauma dump on every person you see because you've let it all out.
Exactly. Or I don't fall back into projection habits, or I don't lash out because I haven't actually taken the time to be like, okay, cool. Yeah, that was a strong subject. I'm feeling a little bit, maybe I'm feeling a little bit anxious after having that conversation because I haven't talked about it in a while. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit angry because the stuff that we touched on, I hadn't really thought about in a long while. So I need to make sure I take that time to close those doors. So the emotions I'm feeling towards a situation that's happened in my past or something we've touched on in therapy, those emotions aren't projected onto whoever I'm seeing next.
Powerful tool. That's something, if anybody's listening to this and they haven't started therapy yet, that's something I'm going to take on board when I get into my therapy sessions is take a little bit of time before and after to open up and then close things down.
Exactly.
A little bit like you and I are both fitness coaches,
Yes, sir.
warming up and cooling down at the end of a session because you can't just leave and go back to normal world. You need time to step in, time to step out.
Exactly.
And is that something you came up with yourself or did your therapist suggest that over time?
That was something that I started doing subconsciously. And then it was only after a few years of doing therapy, my therapist kind of made a comment to me that like I always seem a little bit spaced out because he'd always be able to see like I've been in 3 different locations with him. One was Mountjoy Square, one was the Adelaide Road, and now we're out in Clontarf. But he can always see me coming when I'm walking towards the appointment because I'm very much so, no, that's my time. I need to be there at that time kind of thing. So he always knows when to expect me. And it was after a couple of years that he decided to just almost call me out on it and just be like, you always seem so spaced out. Like you're not aware of what's going on around you. Always have your headphones on. I'll always have my headphones on. Anybody who knows me knows that if I'm not with people, my headphones are on. And even sometimes when I'm with people, my headphones are still attached to my head. And they're just, I use that music to kind of like set
Doing
me up.
everything else.
Exactly. And it allows me to focus on what's going on inside. And yeah, when he said it to me, I was like, I don't know. Like the journey to therapy and the journey where I need my headphones on and I just need to be with myself. And he was just like, okay, why do you think that is? And then that conversation just started and it was like, oh, I was subconsciously preparing myself to be vulnerable. And then I was getting ready to make sure that what I have taken on over the years as responses to being vulnerable, I need time to make sure that the negative responses don't get projected. And I was doing that again, just instinctively. And I think that plays into the fact that I was very emotionally aware of other things, and starting therapy allowed me to understand other emotions that I was feeling and realize that, oh no, I am projecting negative responses onto people I care about just because it's what I was taught to do. It was what
What
it's
you
what
learned
worked.
by watching.
Exactly. It's like that's what worked for me before. So I'm still going to use it today. And I was like, it didn't really work for you before because you're here now.
And when you started the process of therapy, there's kind of a double layered question here.
Mhm.
Was there anything that surprised you quite a bit in the first few sessions? And separately, but tied to that, was there shame around going into it that maybe melted away from those surprises?
The first surprise I had was day one. And even at 16, I remember the day before therapy, I had the conversation with myself being like, this doesn't work if you go in with the same walls and the same mask that you wear every day. You need to leave that shit at the door. And you just need to go in and be honest and let the chips fall where they may. And going in, that the surprise was how freeing that felt to just finally, after years, because at this stage it was 3 years of pent up anxiety and frustration and not understanding that I was depressed. So to actually just be able to go in and just be like, right, all the walls, all the gates, and the mask I've so comfortably worn for 3 years are left at the threshold before I get in here. And I sat down with my therapist that day and I went on a word vomit for about 35 minutes.
Just let it all hang out, spit it out the gob.
Yeah,
Here
and it
we
was like everything that was sitting on the surface, just waiting to get out, finally did. And at the end of the session, he was just like, "Yeah, 8 sessions isn't going to be enough," because that's how much my GP was like, "Oh yeah, like 8 to 12 sessions.
You'll be
That's all
grand.
you need." And I'm like, "Yeah." When I see my GP next, I'm gonna be like, "Yeah, it's been nearly 8 years, by the way, 8 years." But yeah, that was probably one of the biggest surprises that I felt towards my early sessions. And then, like that, I felt the pressure of expectation, but I also kind of had the mentality of saying, fuck the stigma and the stereotypes. Like that, I started theatre really young, and that definitely didn't go down well with my uncles in Finglas, who were born and raised in Finglas. But I didn't
Yeah,
care.
they use some choice language around how you're acting.
They did indeed. They did indeed. But yeah, I didn't care. I didn't care. I loved what I was doing. And therapy for me, I knew was going to help me. And I knew it was going to help me become the man I wanted to be rather than the scared little boy I was.
Which ultimately is fully displaying the characteristics of an aligned masculine being. I was on
Exactly.
another podcast yesterday, not my own one. This one should come out within a week or two, I hope.
Mhm.
Talking about that very fact of that masculinity takes many different places, many different shapes. You not giving a fuck and being like, I'm going to do theatre while I'm also doing boxing, regardless of what my uncles say,
Yep.
is far more masculine than just going, that's fairy stuff. Like, no, it's
Exactly.
not. Badass. Like,
Exactly. It's like,
watch a nigger's laughter.
yeah, like like you look at some of the, like, most people don't realize this, but like the likes of Tupac and stuff, they were theatre kids.
Yeah, he was a
Like,
proper theatre kid. I've seen the clip.
he
Well,
went to drama school, like, and people did, like, he's one of the OG gangster raps. So it's like, yeah, I kind of just said, fuck you to the stereotype of what people thought therapy was. And I was like, no, it's a tool. It's a
yeah,
tool that helps me become who I
tool in
want
your
to
back
be.
pocket to help you process everything you were unable to process by yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's stuff that you're processing by yourself, but you might not be doing in a healthy way.
Yeah, like as you were doing, you were processing it by breaking your hand against the wall. When instead it
Exactly.
can be a conversation to get something off your chest and have
Exactly.
somebody essentially hold a mirror up to you and go, here's where we are.
100%. But yeah, so I never felt shame towards it. And even since I was 16, I was always open about it because I'd have to leave school early on certain days. And eventually, like some of my classmates would ask me, "Oh, where are you going?" I'm like, "I'm in therapy." And I'd see their faces be like, "Therapy?" And I'm just like, "Yep."
And was there any ever hard conversations around that where someone's like, why are you doing that? Or any
Yeah.
like stigmatized words?
Yeah. With some of my close friends, like at this stage, I had what I would say, and I know a couple of them are actually going to see this podcast, so you know who you are. But when I was 16, I had this group, and we called it the Gaiety Group because the lads that I hung around with, one of them, he's been my best mate, and I will name drop him, Mr. Luke Byrne. I love that man. He introduced me to these mates. He was in the Gaiety School of Acting at this stage, and he introduced me to this little group, and we hung around every Saturday. Um, Before they had drama, and I'd kind of just doss around town like that. I didn't mind being by myself. I love my own time. So I'd doss around while they were in class, and then we'd hang out again when they were finished. But they were one of the pivotal groups in my life because there was no judgment from any of the lads or any of the girls that we hung around with. There was no judgment that I was in therapy. There was times where they had walked me to my therapy session and waited in the Starbucks around the corner for me. And then when I came out, I was able to still, that was before I like fully understood that I needed that time afterwards. But like
Yeah.
they didn't judge me. And if I went a little bit quiet, they knew I was just processing what I talked about in therapy and they just leave me be. But they were there, they were present, and they didn't make me feel weak. Like that, talking about that, the stigma around men doing therapy is we oftentimes feel like that's a weakness. It's showing weakness. It's showing emotion is vulnerability in the eyes of a lot of young men and a lot of older men as well. But this group in particular, it never made me feel less than the man I wanted to be because I was talking about how I felt.
That's a beautiful thing to have.
It
And
was.
it's something I think most people will be surprised how supportive the group around them, if they have good friends, if they have family around them, will be the exact same way. Like, I think in 2025, you're going to be struggling to find somebody who will take the piss out of you for saying, yeah, I need to start therapy. I need some help.
Right.
Thankfully, we have people like us who are doing podcasts about this. People talk about it on social media all the time. There's still a level of people doing it to look like they're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But even that is useful because they're getting it out there and aware. So if anybody's listening to this and hearing Robert's story, that he had this supportive group around him, very likely your people will be just as supportive. They might slag you about it. I know my group of mates will take the piss, but they'll take the piss because they love me.
100%. And as once again, that comes down to, and I guarantee it's mainly just the lads around you that kind of take the piss every now and then with it.
Yeah, like me and my mates show love by completely like the worst things you can possibly think to say to each other because we care about each other.
Well, you know damn straight that nobody else, if anybody else that you didn't know said half the shit your mate said to you, they'd be the first ones to hop in and have your back for it.
100%.
It's
And
like, we say it because that's our mat or that's our role. You can't say that shit. And
like that's only between us. That is tight within the group.
exactly. There's history there that you don't have the privilege of knowing. But yeah, having a good support system is definitely,
It's helpful.
it's probably the most important thing you can have, especially. And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because I kind of feel I'm in a unique stage of life where I can talk to both generations, the generation coming up just under me and also the generation that's a little bit ahead of me. I'd be like, yeah, the stigma isn't what you think. And then the younger lads as well, it's like, no, this could actually, if you start using it now, you don't have to go through the shit that you seen your older brother go through or you seen your dad go through. You can get ahead of that curve rather than wait till shit hits the fan to start utilizing it.
Yeah. Like, I haven't got to talk to many people who started therapy in the way you have at 16 to have processed and been developed and get to a stage where when they're a fully grown man, they've already done a lot of this work.
Yeah,
Like, I'm
exactly.
33. I started therapy when I was 19 for a specific thing. I had body dysmorphia and I needed to work through that. It was my belief back then that 18 months of that, I was like, great, therapy's done. And then I can go back to it for 7, 8 years
Yeah.
until a problem came up. Because one thing I think came up in your notes was around using therapy as a consistent tool and not using it as an emergency response.
Exactly. I think therapy is the greatest tool when utilized preemptively.
Yeah, it's a bit like training for your health. If you only start going to the gym when you've had a heart attack, yes, it's good because you've had a heart attack and now we need to get healthy. But in the same way, if you have an emotional episode that changes your life and flips it upside down, yes, go to therapy, process it and help it. But hindsight, it's a great thing. If we started 5 years ago, you're not in that negative space.
Exactly. It's therapy is to your mental health what training is to your physical health. And
Completely.
I think the quicker you start, the earlier you start, the more you're going to get out of it. Rather than have to go through therapy later on down the line and have to go back to what you felt as a 15-year-old and try pull back the scab on an archaic wound. If you started doing it as these pivotal times in your moment, because like by the time you're 15 to 30, you've changed about 10 times as a person. Your core values hopefully haven't changed all that much, but you as a day-to-day person, you've changed so much over those years. And it's only when you're starting to get into your 30s, you kind of start to solidify who you are as a man, as you're probably feeling yourself now. It's like,
yeah. Like every day is school day for me. It's
exactly.
learning a little bit more and seeing who am I going to be when I'm a father in the next couple of years.
Exactly. So I think getting ahead of that curve and being a little bit more preemptive as young men, it's very important. And I think it's very important for men like ourselves. Like I'm 23, you're 33, to be having this conversation that hopefully a 16-year-old will see and be like, oh, wait, these are two guys that are considered like strong men. They go to the gym, they lift, Matt's in better shape than me, but
Everybody's in good shape in their own context. We'll only be positive about
it comes down to like if you're looking at that and you're using the physicality of a man to determine it, and then you hear those type of men talk about the benefits of talking about your feelings, I think that's where the most impact is made. I think that's where the most change is made, and I think that's where the conversation needs to start.
And a conversation that needs to keep being had because there's things like Movember, which is great. We get a whole month where they focus on men's health in general. I thought that it was all just about testicles when it started.
Mhm.
It's about everything to do with mental health, physical health, everything to do with men for the month.
Mhm.
Which is great, but it's 1 month.
Exactly.
People hype up about it, and then all of a sudden, it's a whole year before we've talked about it again.
Yep.
And as you know well from some of what you've explained on these notes, we have an epidemic across the world of young men, old men, middle-aged men, all men taking their own lives. And most times that happens, even if they are doing the work. So within that space, I don't want to dig too hard and pull that thread too much.
Mhm.
But what's been experiences around that for you where you think you can give some insight to maybe help somebody not go down that route? Things they might be able to do from your experiences with therapy. So as you pointed out, at 16 when you started therapy, you started because you knew if you didn't, you wouldn't be here at 18.
Mm-hmm. At 16, sparking a wall was my only thoughts of self-harm at that time. There were other aspects where at certain stages in my life, I did consider taking my own life. And that was a very dark time for me. As anybody who's struggled with that before knows. But it came from a lack of understanding what was going on within me. I didn't understand again why I was feeling the way I was feeling, why I was reacting the way I was reacting, and I felt lost in who I was. I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror. I didn't know who I was or who I was becoming, and it terrified me. And it seemed like a good option at the time. But talking, reaching out, leaning on the people around me was what pulled me back and made me realize that that wasn't the only answer. Um, and safe to say, without my grandmother and without therapy, I wouldn't be here.
You're
Um,
two absolute rocks and homes from the sound of everything. Because I would
exactly.
like to highlight for you the way you described going to your grandmother's house is the exact same way you describe going to see your therapist. In that they
Yes.
both know reliably Robert's going to be here at this time. I can look out and know this will be here. I'll be ready for him.
Yep.
So it's an interesting parallel. So they're
Yep.
the two people you mention as there who pulled you back.
Exactly. And it is because I've had like that. I got very good at that age of pushing people away and being very destructive towards relationships, romantically, platonically, most a lot of the time familial as well. But the two absolutes from the time I was 16 to this day have been my grandmother and my therapist. And just over 3 years ago now, it sparked a very difficult conversation that brought me back to being that 16-year-old kid. And that was when one of my mom's ex-partners, the only person I ever really considered a father to me, he took his own life on the day of his birthday, um, just over 3 years ago. And I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. I'd always met he still talked to my mom, still had a good friendship with my mom, and I'd meant to meet up with him, but I kept putting it on the long finger, and I kept being like, oh, I'll get to it next week. That sort of mentality, and then before I knew it, I was getting told that he wasn't with us anymore.
Which is heavy. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
Yeah, it is heavy, and that sparked the conversation of what
Bringing
would
you
one
back
talk
to feeling that way.
exactly, and also what would one chat have changed, because that could have changed a whole lot. And then it led me to kind of thinking, okay, cool. I want to be able to do more in this space. Because when you're having those sort of feelings, and anybody who's had those sort of feelings before, know that one conversation makes a whole lot of difference. One 10-minute chat with your mate can pull you way off that ledge. And for anybody going through that, and anybody who's struggling with that, have a chat.
Yeah.
Have a chat. Reach out to anybody. Whether it's your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, your grandfather, your grandmother. Reach out to someone and just be like, I'm not doing the best. It's a don't get me wrong, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a hard conversation to have, especially with someone that you love and someone you have a relationship with, because you don't want you don't want to be a burden. That's the mentality that people who struggle with that sort of way of thinking definitely resonate with, is feeling like a burden on the people that you care about. But I guarantee the people around you would much rather have a conversation with you now than be at your graveside giving the eulogy.
Every time. There's not a single person that cares about you that doesn't want to have an uncomfortable conversation instead of telling a sad story.
Exactly. They would all much rather have the uncomfortable conversation where you let them know that you are not the character you put on a daily basis, than not have you around anymore.
It could be maybe a useful framing for somebody that is sitting and feeling like there'll be a burden to have that conversation, to think how much more of a burden they're going to be to the people they love if they go ahead with that.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially. I have gone through my own moments of feeling like the only option was out and taking my own life. I stood by a river and thought, this is it. I'm going to jump into this. It was when I was 17, maybe as old as 18, in a very negative relationship where the person had actually told me I should go and do that. And I stood by the river looking at water and thinking, yeah, I'll do this. And then I had this rigmarole in my head of, if I jump in here and I'd put on nice clothes because I thought, oh, people that do this do that.
Mm-hmm.
If I jump into this, I'm really good at swimming. There's some rocks here. I don't think this is going to take me out. This is actually going to be uncomfortable. And I ended up logicking my way out of going, no, maybe I'll do it another way next week.
Mm-hmm.
And then opening up and talking about it to one of my friends, cleared it out where he's like, you're a fucking idiot. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to have to go and deal and tell people your stories.
Yes, I don't want to talk about you as a memory.
Yeah,
It's like we got plenty more to do together.
exactly.
And that's going to be the mentality of a lot of people that care about you if you're having those sort of feelings.
And it is a heavy one to discuss, but it is a powerful one to discuss because if one person hears it and goes, okay, I see the impact it's had on these two men, maybe there's a lighter, brighter way out of it.
Exactly.
And with that, we'll shift into maybe something that's still heavy, but maybe a little easier and lighter to talk about is discussion on faith.
Mhm.
Because faith has become a huge part of my life. So it's something I'm going to be dragging into all of my episodes.
Mhm.
I've got my NIV Bible beside my desk that I get to read every day.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that you had an experience with getting into faith through Jehovah's Witness and through old gods. So
Mhm.
how much of that do you want to talk about?
Well, my belief in the old gods has kind of always been there. The old gods being the Norse gods. I still, to this day, wear Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer. I've always felt connected. Yeah, there we go. I've always
Right.
really felt connected to that culture and to that heritage. Um, and I had my own sort of experience with the gods when I was in that very dark place as a young man, and that led me to feeling more connected to them, feeling again finding a sort of haven in the belief that the old gods were still there and still communicating with us. And then within my last relationship, my ex partner was a Jehovah's Witness. And obviously they're two very conflicting religions. Two
Yeah,
very
it's very chalk and cheese.
but we both went into it with an open mind and a desire to understand the other person and what they believed in and why it was so strong, why that belief system was so strong for them. And it wasn't just a one-way thing. It was both of us. She was very, very open to learning about my faith and my gods and the what would be the sort of scriptures in my faith. As in the Bibles, you have scriptures, you have verses and stuff like that. We have similar in my faith. She was very open to understanding what made me think and why I felt so connected to those gods as I was for her. And she was having a little bit of a conflict of faith herself. She'd kind of taken a step back because of her own personal struggles, but she was finding her way back to it. And I wanted to be as supportive as I could. So I started attending meetings with her and her amazing parents. And I started to feel a little bit of a call towards Jehovah as well. And like that, I was going to meetings semi regularly. I went to a couple other big events, and um, I don't fit the stereotype of a Jehovah's Witness. I'm covered in tattoos, and at that stage, I had long hair tied back in a ponytail or plaits, and being covered in tattoos, piercings, and long hair, rocking up to a Jehovah's Witness meeting on a
With
Sunday.
Mjolnir hanging off your neck, being like, you up the Norse. They're like, all right, we'll let you in.
Yeah, and the thing is, it was none of them had a problem having that conversation with me either. I went in and they shook my hands, and many of the times I'd be asked, "Oh, what do your tattoos mean? Do your tattoos have meaning?" And anybody who knows me knows every single tattoo that's on my body has a story. And I was kind of taken aback by that. And yeah, when me and my ex-partner split up, about a year and a half ago, that led me to be like, oof, I kind of miss having those meetings, and I miss being around that God. And it brought up a conflict of faith in me that I'm still finding my way through. Like, I'll still have nights where I pray to Odin or Thor, and there's nights where I'll pray to Jehovah. And it's been a difficult time to navigate, but it's a journey that I know will make me stronger in whichever faith pulls me later
I
down the
think
line.
it's a very important foundational part of life that a lot of people have been missing for the last 20 years in Ireland because of the struggles we had with church in Ireland. A lot of Irish people pushed away from it, and the version of church that I have found is a evangelist. What's the word? Losing my word on it. Pentecostal.
Yeah.
A Pentecostal evangelists place called Lighthouse, where they've got one in Blanche, Dundalk, Navan, and they're about to open one up in Swords where I live.
Mhm.
So I got to know some of the people from it. It's just a very, as you described about the Jehovah's Witness meetings, very open, supportive, and friendly people.
Mhm.
Like everyone you meet shakes your hands, says have a blessed day. It's just a nice place to be. And it's not like I'm making assumption that you probably grew up Catholic because of where we grew up, so you probably
I
went
did.
to Catholic
Yeah.
church. It's not like that rocking in and doing the structured mass. It's like
Mhm.
you go in and there's music, and then they're talking about ideas from the Bible that apply to actual everyday life.
Mhm.
Like one of the guys, the head of the church, he doesn't like to call himself that. The first time I saw him say sermon, his sermon was about the dinosaurs. Remember that TV show in the 90s?
Yes.
There's a little baby dinosaur.
Yeah.
The sermon was around that, not the mama thing.
Not the
'Cause he's
mama.
like,
Yeah.
father's not being respected in this TV show, and it's like leading into all these things. And I'm like, I think I can get down with this.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds quite interesting.
So it's a nice open space. If you ever want to join me for one of them, it's not me evangelizing and being like, come to the church, but it's the kind of thing, rock up, check it out for a meeting, well, for an event, and see what feels good.
I'd be down to join you one of the weeks.
Yeah, look, any Sunday. For now, it's Blanchardstown, 10 a.m. and 12 a.m. I go to one of them.
Yeah.
So if you want, we'll connect after the podcast about timing for that side of stuff, but we will keep running through.
Yeah.
Because let's go into your coaching. So one thing that we touched on a little bit is how much we both love to train and how useful training is. But one big problem that I think we've both identified separately is training can be a great tool for your mental health, but it also be a great tool to avoid dealing with your mental health.
Yes, most definitely. And I think I don't think it's ever been as present in young men as it is today. Like, I'm sure your Instagram feed is just as full up with gym reels as mine. And a lot of the ones that I see is around, for 2 hours a day, I blast my music, I consume enough caffeine to kill a small animal, and I
And I
forget
just
about my
smash.
worries. Yeah, and I forget about the shit I'm dealing with. And it's like, people think that's healthy. And now I will be the first to hold my hands up and say, I still do that. And
Yeah, all of us
I
do.
have been doing that for the last little while. I've been back into that habit of not using it as a tool, but using it as a way to avoid, not to deal with it, but to get away from it. And I think every now and then, sometimes using it as a way to just get away from your struggles can be useful. But for the most part, if you have no other outlet for your emotions, then using it solely as a way to avoid them becomes detrimental.
100%. Like, I think we don't all need to sit in the shit and feel the emotion all day. So if you
Exactly.
are in a position where you're going through something, you're processing it with therapy, you're doing all the work, but you're needing a break. Like, training can be great if it's used as that tool of, you know what, for an hour, I want to just focus on my body, do nothing and feel nothing except the physical challenge. If you're doing the work, great. If you're not
Exactly.
and you think your training is your mental health tool and it's just avoiding feeling something for 2 hours, time to rework the training a little bit.
Exactly. Because also it becomes that way of not wanting to feel what you're feeling inside, so you feel something physically, which we
Yeah.
touched on earlier. That just
In the wall instead of feeling it, or maybe squeezing a bench press so that you feel pain in your pecs instead of pain in your heart.
exactly. So it becomes it becomes detrimental because you're using something that should be building your body as a way of harming yourself. You're training to the point where you're in pain because now you can focus on that rather than the fact that you're going through a breakup or you're struggling with work or your finances aren't where you want them to be. So instead you decide to feel the DOMS for the next 2 days.
Which can be a nice little distraction. But
Yeah.
there's another perspective from this.
Mhm.
And I'm a big fan of Modern Wisdom. I think you know that, the old podcast.
I do
Everybody that
indeed.
listens to it so far, I bang
Yeah.
on about that often.
Great
Chris
podcast.
Williamson, banging.
Yeah.
I look up to it immensely.
Yep. It is an incredible podcast. Great
He
conversation.
he was on Pierce Morgan recently, and
Mhm.
they had a huge disagreement. Shocker to be on Pierce Morgan and have a disagreement.
Oh,
Their disagreement was actually around the balance of exercise and mental health versus therapy and what needs to be done. Mr. Morgan's view was, oh, you absolutely need to do therapy. That's the most important thing. I think we both agree that is very important and necessary for going through some stuff. Chris's opinion on it was, yes, therapy is important. We need to do it. But if you are sitting in the absolute shit and you are dug down into horrible emotions and you're trying to outthink your way out of a problem, it might be more useful if you have no way of looking to find something better. If you are physically unfit, weak, and incapable, if you start with exercise and work towards the mental stuff, it might be another path if you have no way out. And it kind of hit me where I'm like, both of them are right, but both of them are wrong. So at
yeah.
the same time, both of them are ultimately right. Because if you're sitting there depressed out of your head, you have no idea what path you need to take, but you're also physically completely out of shape and not doing anything. Simply starting the process to go for a walk, which might be really hard if you're depressed,
Mhm.
might be the first step, to be a bit puntastic,
Yeah.
towards being capable of doing the mental work.
Yeah. I think that comes from two different vantage points. I think they're both right from two different vantage points. And yeah, again, like yourself, I kind of agree with both of them. Um,
I
because
think it's
again,
situation dependent.
exactly, it's like you can be like if you're extremely overweight and that's leading you to feel lethargic all the time, and you don't have the energy to do anything. Once you start training, as we've seen with clients over the years, once you start training, your energy comes back. You start to feel more energized, and when you have more energy, you're more likely to start that work mentally.
Yeah, you're
Same
more
as-
likely to say yes to uncomfortable situations.
Exactly. And then it also goes on the other side. If you're really skinny, I was a really skinny kid. I've had clients go from skinny to in shape. That can be a source of insecurity as well because you don't feel as capable. And then by working on your physical health and becoming stronger, becoming more physically fit, that takes away a physical insecurity. And it then opens up space to start working on something else. So I think they go
Yeah.
hand in hand, like that mental health and
As we
physical health.
talk this out, I'm just thinking more and more. I'm like, I think I'm biased, but I think Chris might actually be right. The starting with physical,
Yeah.
once the framework of, okay, I'm going to spend the next 6 weeks just trying to do whatever I can bring myself to do physically, and use that as momentum building. To, as you're like, you know what, I've worked out twice a week for the last 2 weeks. I think I can text a therapist and be like, can we start some?
Exactly. Like think of it like this. How many clients have you had that were riddled with gym anxiety?
Oh, like nearly every single one. If they
Exactly.
weren't already coming in who were trainers.
They were terrified to come into the gym. So imagine you do 6 weeks of coming in even just 3 times a week for 15, 20 minutes. You put yourself in that uncomfortable situation multiple times a week.
Yeah, exposure therapy.
It then becomes, okay, cool. I can put myself in an uncomfortable situation for 15 minutes once per month.
Yeah,
Talk about my feelings. And
we've just solved it. We've solved their argument.
yeah, there we go.
He's right. Pierce Morgan's not wrong, but he's not right.
Yeah, he's not wrong, but again, it's his vantage point. Pierce Morgan isn't exactly the most physically active man.
Well, we say that. He's had some slagging over the past little while about his physical shape because
Mhm.
of some of the guests he brings on and some of his discussions around gender politics and all of that.
Mhm.
He's actually had a coach for the last year and a half, 2 years. He's been training.
Okay.
When in the suit, you don't see a huge change. I don't think he was ever
Yes.
super overweight.
No.
He's relatively capable. I've seen some
Okay.
videos of him training. He's moving like 30-kilo dumbbells on a flat press.
Okay.
He's a big.
I would love if the conversation had a circle back to how do you feel now that you've started training for 18 months? How has that impacted your mental health? Do you feel better now that you're more capable?
It would have been a good lane to take it, and if I ever get to interview or be on his show, I'll ask him.
Yeah, 100%. Because I guarantee, and I am biased to it, but I guarantee he might change his tune if asked that sort of question.
Yeah, like your own framing is the best way to change your mind.
Yep.
Have your own situation and go, yeah. And for anybody who's listening to this, for clarity, we're not saying to stave off starting therapy if you feel like you can. This is more if you're somebody listening to this that's sitting in a deep dark hole in your house where you feel like you can't do anything. If it seems more palatable to go for a 10-minute walk than to go to a therapy session, start with the walk and prove trust in yourself and your ability to do actions and stack those wins till you feel ready. As long as you don't keep saying, next week I'll be ready. Set a timeline, man. Say 8 weeks from now, I will have at least started the conversation around working on the mental.
100%.
But let's not get a run of ourselves where we're just going to continue to ramble into all different topics. The message you want men to hear. So I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to pick the best one.
Yes, sir.
What would you say to a man that says, I do not want to talk about my feelings?
Why?
And if that response is something along the lines of, I can just get on with it. I don't really need to talk about that. I deal with it my own way. When you know that the conversation has got there because they're dark.
Mm-hmm. That conversation then takes the turn to don't think about it as for yourself. Think about it for the people that are in your life. Do you want your son to feel how you're feeling now when he's your age? or do you want him to feel happier? And that's where I bring that conversation, because as men, we are, for the most part, it's instinctually to provide something, to add value to those around us and those we love. And if you know that I feel like shit on a day-to-day basis, but I go to work and I get on with it. You don't want your son to feel that way. You don't want,
It's good framing.
yeah, you don't want your son to feel that way. You want your son to be better than how you're dealing with it. But that starts with yourself. And then it presses that button for a lot of men where it's like, oh, by talking about my feelings, I can add value to my family because now I'm more emotionally available. They can come to me about these things because I understand what's going on for myself.
Powerful framing. I would add to a little bit from the perspective of if a man is in a place where he's like, I don't want to talk about my feelings, and maybe it's in the framing of them trying to go to therapy.
Mhm.
I love all of that to say that you need to do it for your son, for your family, for all of that, to give a reason. But maybe if you're listening to this and you're in that camp of, I don't want to talk about my feelings to some stranger. Don't talk about your feelings. Talk about your story. Sit down with the person and share your life. And as you share that story of your life, things will come up. Let them come out is the biggest thing. Because even this conversation that we've had today, a lot of times when it comes to men's work, and this is something that comes up a lot in MRT, the organization I'm part of, Men's Rising Together, conversation is medicine in the same way that ayahuasca can be medicine, the breath work can be medicine, all of these things. And when you talk about your own story, you have moments of emotional wells opening up and bursting up through the middle. Time you probably felt emotions coming up into the eyes and the back of the neck and all of that because your story is important to you.
Mhm.
If a man is emotionally blocked off and not feeling okay with talking about feelings, the start point of tell your story to a therapist or to a trusted friend and be okay with those emotions starting to come out, even if you can learn to name a few of them,
Well
can
put.
be some magic.
Yeah, that is very, very well put.
To move things along a bit, I want to give some actionable advice to any listeners that go through this that I want to come right from you because you have hours upon hours upon hours more experience in therapy than me. I've had a bit. I've probably collected of about 40 hours over my 33 years, but you've got high
I, I,
500s.
I don't want to. I don't want to even want to do that calculation.
It's a very useful investment, I'll say that.
It definitely is. It definitely is.
But the actionable advice that I want you to create for somebody listening to this is if someone listening is quietly overwhelmed but still functioning, what is the first step you tell them to take in the next 24 hours after listening to this conversation?
Oof. Take a step back from one aspect that's overwhelming you. Just one. You might be overwhelmed by work, your relationship, your finances, something like that. Take a step back from one of them, even if just for a few minutes. And change your mentality towards it in
And
terms of
what does that
and,
look like
and
in
how you
terms of
speak
like
to it. So,
taking a step back?
for
Because I
example,
know someone sitting in that might seem vague. So give
yeah,
them like
for
clear action.
for example, if you're in work and you're overwhelmed because you have a report due, but there's something that's kind of stumped you with it, take a step back from it, look at a different report, find something in that report that will help you on the report you're currently stuck on. Because once you take a step back and change your vantage point, like we were speaking about earlier, the problems aren't what you think they are. You've expanded them. You've made them a lot bigger than what they are. And sometimes the simplest way forward is to take a step back.
I like it. It's very simple. It's very actionable. And I know it's something I used to do when I had a lot of reports in a certain job, you might remember, to just switch task. That can be one of the easiest things if work is overwhelming you. Don't stop working, but just start working on something that's a little bit lower hanging fruit to make you feel like you've accomplished something.
Exactly.
And before we go into wrap up, where I'm going to ask you to tell the people where they can find you and if you've got anything big coming up, I'm just going to double check the question box on Instagram and see what we had come through.
No problem.
Um, We're very fancy with all the tech jumping all over the places. We've got iPad here. We've got recording up there. We've got all the computers jumping around. So we have one good, I wouldn't say controversial question, but probably one that might be controversial for the people whose job it's supposed to be to make this easy to do. Do you think therapy for young adults and teenagers is as accessible as it should be?
No. Hands down, no.
And you talked about your experience of getting into it as a teenager, that it was through the GP and they just sent you a number and you were to go and book in and do that. Did it cost money back then? Was it
Yeah.
covered? Yeah.
It wasn't cheap. It wasn't cheap. And it's not. And I think the issue lies in the availability of high quality therapy for young people in general, men and women, struggling emotionally. I think the standard we are upholding that's accessible is far too low.
And from your experience of doing hundreds of hours of therapy, what do you think could change that? Is it pulling in better quality jobs that are going to entice more therapists to stay in Ireland once they've qualified? Is it changing the parameters for how somebody can become qualified? What do you think makes the move?
And that one stumped me a little bit. Because like
But
I've
there's no
been,
good system.
yeah,
If it was
I've been
easy to
very
fix it,
fortunate. I've been very fortunate that my therapist is a part of a private clinic, his own private clinic. And I haven't had to have much dealings with what's publicly available. Because anytime I've went through financial struggles or anything like that, my therapist has always been very accommodating. And like that, I'm the exception, not the rule. So
yeah.
in
Like not
terms of
everybody builds that kind of relationship with a therapist. Hopefully they do, but
exactly, and for a lot of people that I've talked to, because like that, I'll have this conversation with anybody who wants to when it comes to therapy. Oftentimes they don't find a therapist that they connect with straight away, and so they'll either get completely discouraged, not want to go back, or they'll try a couple of different therapists. And I was only having a conversation with one of my clients who's tried therapy a couple of times and it hasn't really worked. And I was like, so what's the harm in trying again?
yeah, it's like dating.
Yeah,
Like,
did it
oh, you
cost you-
relationship didn't work. You're going to be abstinent now? No, get back out there.
it's like, what made you like, okay, cool. What did it cost you to do that therapy session? Did it bring you more harm to have that conversation with someone you didn't really connect with? Not really. You just got a little bit frustrated. So just try again. But to be completely honest, I don't know, because I'm not as familiar with the struggles with publicly available therapy. So I
Fair.
wouldn't know where they should start with
Well,
that.
to answer this person's question, from my understanding of it, because I'm in the same place as you, Robert, I don't have a lot of experience going through the public support system.
Mhm.
I know there is things in place. Last year, I ran a charity powerlifting competition called Lift the Stigma. which was all around lifting the stigma of mental health, where we raised money for Pieta. Pieta are obviously huge and they get a lot of money in. I wanted to do something for mental health and wanted an easy option to connect with. They do have free counseling services for people who can't afford it, mostly online. They do have drop-in clinics, like in Swords. There is one just off the main street where you can't walk in and just show up. There's a number, you call them, you book an appointment. They are fully funded through donations and whatever comes through, so they can only do the hours they can afford to do. There is some other organizations out there like Samaritans that you can call if you're really stressed, freaked out, and call and just offload. But oftentimes those people most times are trainee therapists, so they're going through the process of learning, but for the most part it's a friendly voice on the end of the phone to then suggest you talk to somebody more qualified. Because at the end of the day, people need to make money, so money needs to come from somewhere, and there's a lot of effort that goes into becoming a highly skilled therapist. It just maybe needs to be some kind of, this goes against my principle of wanting a small government with very little impact by the government to our everyday life, but a government program to support and pay for things, it's one place where I won't fight them.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're taking all this tax off us, put it to good use.
Exactly. But just touching on you throughout your point, to add to that, I think like that with the likes of Pieta, Samaritans and stuff like that, it is very hard for people to build a personal relationship with a therapist.
100%. Because it is one person on the phone, next person next time.
Exactly. You don't get a chance to build a relationship or a rapport with your therapist. And I think that has been one of the biggest strengths to my journey within therapy was having a strong, personable connection with my therapist. So I think if anything could be done to advance the services provided, would be figure out a way to make it a little bit more consistent for the people needing this help.
Great. It's just finding the way to make that happen. Maybe we need to overthrow the government and make some different decisions about what they do with taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's lead it through the closer then.
Yes, sir.
So where can people find you? What are you doing? I know you'd mentioned that you're building the Men Matter initiative potentially on Skool.
Yes, sir.
So tell the people, where can they find you?
So at the minute, it's just Instagram. I've deactivated my TikTok a little while ago. But it's just Instagram at the minute at Dusk to Dawn Fitness. So it's DUSKTODON Fitness on Instagram.
I'll be able to click it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And then the Men's Matter initiative is an initiative I have started in around men's mental health and using training as a tool to step forward. And like we were talking about earlier, becoming a little bit more physically confident, to have the confidence to go to therapy or to seek help elsewhere for your mental health. And there's been some changes of how I'm running it. And one of the things that I've started to look into more is creating a school group that will be publicly accessible to anybody who wants to hop into it, that don't want to be as hands-on with the program as some of the other lads.
Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing that grow. And obviously, if you want any support in helping with systems to make that work or connecting you into MRT, would probably be a great group for me to pop you into. It's a free WhatsApp community that leads into like the events and different things that we can go out to.
I would love that.
Might be you can learn from in that, because for leading men in that kind of space, there's a lot of tools you can pick up from the lads in there.
I would love that. I'm always open to learning from people who have different experiences, because like that, none of our stories are the same.
Yeah. Everyone's lived a unique life that brings them ultimately to the same place when we look at it long term.
Exactly.
Where we're all looking for healing and then looking to help people heal.
100%.
Well, Robert, Thank you for coming on and having a great conversation. Thank you for being
Appreciate
guest too on We Need to Talk. So your episode will be out on Friday. I'll put your tags into that. Can anybody that listens to this reach out to you on Instagram and talk to you about anything that we brought up here?
100%. Any questions, anything, if you want to just have a conversation to me about my story, or you want to maybe start the conversation of your own story, feel free to drop me a DM.
Perfect. That goes for me too. If anybody wants to talk, Instagram, YouTube, all the stuff, wherever you feel comfortable.